Joining me this morning on the AM Agenda program, the Shadow Finance Minister Helen Coonan and the Small Business Minister Craig Emerson. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Hello, Kieran.
Good morning.
G'day, Helen.
Craig, the President there said there cannot be a repeat of history, but how concerned do you think he is, the United States government is, and of course, by extension, Australia should be when it comes to risky behaviour on Wall Street?
Well, we ignore the lessons of history at our peril, and Wall Street has often displayed risky behaviour. That behaviour, the greed, combined with just the absence of a decent regulatory framework for financial markets, was the root cause of the global financial crisis, which then morphed into a global recession. So we must understand that, and we must work to have a better global regulatory system for financial markets without, Kieran, at the same time embracing regulation of product markets, which is another word for tariffs. We don't want to see a global trade war like happened under the Hoots-Morley tariff of the 1930s. That led to a deepening of the recession, and I think that both sides of politics have the view that we must not have an increase in regulation around product markets, but certainly in financial markets there was a big failure there.
The US President didn't seem to get the warmest reception, Senator Coonan, at the Wall Street address. He went there, spoke to 150 of the Wall Street figures, and there was very little applause. He certainly gave it to them frank and blunt.
Well, Kieran, I mean, there is, I think, a very entrenched culture, particularly in the United States, where the weaknesses and excesses of the financial system is widely, attributed some of the consequences and that flowed right really around the world. Not as bad here. I think the point for us is that whilst global regulation is obviously important and that there be some coordination where it impacts, say, in the flow of capital and things like that, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that we do have, even on Julia Gillard's recognition, the best regulatory system in the world, and that's because of the heavy lifting that was done, I must say, modestly, partly by me as Assistant Treasurer. We were putting in place all of those regulatory controls following the HIH collapse, the capital adequacy requirements, the stress testing for banks, all of those things that have meant that we weren't as impacted as the United States market. So I think Obama really does have quite a task at hand to get after that culture in the United States.
Listening to that speech this morning, he had another point which I thought was interesting for its implications for Australia, related to the central role of the G20. Let's recap a little bit now of what the President said on that issue.
At a summit in London in April, leaders agreed to work together in an unprecedented way to spur global demand, but also to address the underlying problems that caused such a deep and lasting global recession. And this work will continue next week in Pittsburgh when I convene the G20, which has proven to be an effective forum for coordinating policies among key developed and emerging economies, and one that I see taking on an important role in the future.
An important role into the future, the President said, for the G20. Helen Coonan, you'd welcome that, because Australia, of course, is around the table at the G20, and the Prime Minister, to give him credit, has lobbied for the G20 to be a central player in all of this.
Well, I think with the global meltdown, obviously a forum such as the G20 has significance because it is able to bring people together around a table to try to make sure that there's a much more seamless global regulatory system. Now, in some of those situations, it's certainly worth doing, but for instance, with the American system, what Obama was talking about was putting in place, as I understand it, some consumer protections and some central bank supervision. Now, we've had that with the introduction of APRA. That's a superb prudential regulator. I think Craig would agree with that. They do a great job. And, of course, ASIC as our consumer body. So I think that while globally it is important that we have a seat at the table, it is important that where there are global impacts, that we're there, but we mustn't lose sight of the fact that we don't want to strangle ourselves with more regulation regulation when our regulation works well.
Yeah, that's right. I suppose, Craig Emerson, when you look at the role that the G20 has played over the last 12 months, there was a sense that maybe it might be just a short-term mechanism, that the discussions would fall back to the G7, G8 beyond this, but now it seems that the President wants to use this as an ongoing basis for discussion, which has Australia, China, India all around the table.
The G20 is here to stay, and Kevin Rudd took a leadership role in pushing the G20 forward as the appropriate international forum within which to discuss and come to agreement on some of these regulatory and coordination issues. Not only did Kevin do that, Australia is playing a leading role in the G20. It's not, as Joe Hockey seems to believe, an international left-wing conspiracy, as he was twittering away in question time. It's an organisation or a group of nations that's very important in this global coordination exercise. And I note that Malcolm Turnbull, when we are debating, I'm pleased to hear what you've said, Helen, but when Malcolm looks for some sort of support for his very, very light regulatory approach, he goes to John Taylor, Professor John Taylor. Now, John Taylor is a fellow who believes that governments caused the global recession, not Wall Street, not the greed, not the lack of regulation. So I think Malcolm should really be picking more stable and more central centre-type advisors rather than relying on the John Taylors of the world.
As we mark the anniversary of the Lehman Brothers